Well, there came a little moment here when I got a little tired from all the sewing, and in between these videos, I kind of did a different video to describe how I was putting water seal on the garden gnome, and you can see the garden gnome is over here. But I have come back on now because it is just one of those moments when I feel a little more need to carve right now. I feel like it probably does me a little good just to try to carve these things right now, kind of get a little further along on the work and the business, tell you all a little bit more about what's going on. And like what you're going to see here is I am going to continue doing the next 5 of those Santas to which I did the first 5 on the previous video. What I would like to kind of share is about some of the ways about how the sewing went. There was little flaws and little troubles in it, and I kind of got past them. I'd just like to tell you all how that the way that sometimes the work comes along on things, I make my own patterns to sew from, to sew stuffed animals from. Sometimes the little things I'll see online will give me ideas as to where to start, and then kind of translate it into some of my own patterns, take some of my own animals and make carbon copies of the original patterns and translate them into other patterns. And sometime I'd like to do a video on that if I ever get a chance to do so. It'll be so great if I ever do, and it'll be so nice just to kind of get to take a little adventure and show y'all so much more of what I can do with the things I do and the things I make. And sometimes I'd say that ventures can be a little costly. There's been a certain cat pattern I've worked on over and over again. It's kind of like one where I would work on 2 at a time to start with, try to make it so that I have, like, each cat is kind of standing straight up, and one cat has its head turned to the left and the other one has its head turned to the right, and depending on which side of the pattern you use or how you sew it on the denim, you can make it so that the head is either turned to the left or turned to the right. And I've tried kind of doing it a little bit of both ways. First time around, I used a piece of denim that was just way too thick. Well, I'll sometime later tell you the story behind that one as to how it was a piece that just was never worn all that much. You probably have to wear them for a long time before they get that way. I will tell you all, when I go to making those things, that I accept donations of them sometimes, but what I always tell people is that there's only certain ways I'll accept donations of jeans. They must be in too bad a shape to either go to a thrift store or go to a charity or be used as a hand-me-down, because if they are still wearable, I believe that there might be somebody who needs them more than I do. Because, of course, I might be the person to make a lot of crafts out of them, but there are people in this world who are poor and who have to shop at thrift stores for a reason. There are reasons why thrift stores need those jeans, because there are people who, they might have special needs, and there might not be that many jobs out there they can do, and they might probably need employment at a thrift store, because that might be the only way they can get paid, and probably by selling donations like that might be the only way that a thrift store can really get the money to pay their employees to work. So that's just one of the reasons why I think it helps so much and does so much good, that anybody who's able to use something is able to have it. There do come times when, especially with that pair that wasn't worn very much, it was a pair that when I tried to make the first cat out of it, the ears couldn't come out so good. The fact that it wasn't worn so much was the reason why the denim was so thick. And once it came down to trying to use it, I even tried cutting off the tail and the ears, trying to make the tail a little shorter to be like a dog's tail, cut the ears into a rounder shape to make it like a dog's ears, but it still couldn't turn out very well. I even made another set of cats from some pairs that had been worn so longer and were not as tough, not as thick, kind of a little, I'd say, easier to use. But once it came down to them, I mean, on the pattern, the way it was originally made, the ears were so small that with that thick denim fabric, it was really hard to get them pointed. There was probably one that I made where it was just kind of a little difficult on the ears to turn them out, and even on one where the little thing that you use to punch the hole in and make the fabric go through ended up kind of causing a little rip at the place where the fabrics were sewn together. That kind of causes and creates a little mess here and there, and I'd say the thing was that it didn't go so well, so I made another version of the pattern where I kind of expanded the ears a little bit. Once I expanded the ears of the pattern, they looked more realistic. They looked more like a cat's actual ears. So I liked it better, sewed it out. I will say it got to be some work to put into it, and I will say I got them finished out today. There was probably a little error in them here and there, and a little bit of fravel and unravel, but the good little thing about it is that I was able to take the pair of fabric scissors that I work with, and I was able to cut off the little loose threads and loose ravels here and there and get it where it just looks so much nicer and neater. And there is just something especially about the way that pattern works that I decided I would take them and just cut off a little bit, or I'm trying to say, losing my words here, but what I would do is couldn't really sew all the detail into the face, so I used a little fabric paint to paint some details into their faces, to kind of make out their mouth on there, to kind of paint in a little pink nose, and since the denim of the muzzle was dark, paint a white mouth on there. And as soon as that dries out, we'll be putting some little circles of black on there to make the eyes. It'll all be nice and neat once it all turns out well, and be a little thing to look at here and there. Make sure we have a little happiness in our lives and show people a little grace and let them see a little opportunity we have just to look at nice little things, show people what we do, what we're capable of. Sometimes things come out and like the cats at first, they looked like little stray cats, like the poor homeless kitties, like you probably find in a trash dump or something like that. Sometimes you just find them kind of roaming the streets. They're little stray cats, and it gets kind of sad because they don't have homes. I mean, I tell you all that I have friends who are wildlife specialists, wildlife rehabbers. They know how to work with things like that, how to feed stray cats. I used to have a friend who was bringing home stray cats all the time. There are some that, even though they're of a domestic breed, they live kind of wild. I could tell you all a little story about a time in 2005. I was out by the Goodwill just dropping off some donations in that little bin they had out there to collect them in, and there was a mother cat out there with her kittens. They were playing with all the little toys that were dropped out there around the donation drive, and then, I kind of decided to test something a little bit. The thing of it is that when it comes to wild animals, when it comes to a mother animal and her baby, you really don't want to approach them because they might get a little defensive. This was a situation where I decided to test it a little bit. Decided since they were domestic cats, I'd probably try walking up to the kittens just to see what the mother would do. But sure enough, once I started walking over there, she started walking towards me, so I had to turn the other way and leave. So what it goes to show you is animals can be wild or domestic. Sometimes even if they're a house animal, they might kind of be that way when it comes to their babies. One thing I know for sure is that that's how farm animals are. Mother cows real protective of their calves. I know mother horses can be very protective of their foals. I know there was one time I was a teenager, I was out visiting on a farm. I went inside of a fence where a mother horse and her foal were. So lucky I didn't get hurt because I sort of kind of walked out there, kind of wanted to get a closer look at a foal, get close to it. The foal started walking towards its mother, and then a young girl who was volunteering there, and believe me, she was just a child. She was younger than me. So she came up there and she said to me that the farmer said he wanted us to come back. This was a recreational farm, of course, and I was there for a birthday party when this happened. But when I heard that the farmer wanted us to come back, I asked the young girl why, and she said, because the mother will hurt you. So, one thing you come to see is that they can be farm animals, house animals, or anything, but they're still going to protect their babies somehow. And I will say, no matter how wild you live, there are things in the wild and things in houses and things on farms. Some people even kind of domesticate wildlife. Sometimes there are some animals that are naturally wild, yet, and have wild relatives, yet somebody might breed them in captivity. They might be born in captivity, but they will still have their wild instincts. I know for one thing, it's kind of like how it was whenever it came to people who kept lions and cougars as pets on special farms, special game farms. And, the thing I always heard was that when people keep cats as pets versus when they keep dogs as pets, cats are generally not as much responsibility as dogs. At least to some people, that's how they say it is. If they like cats better, at least. But I've learned that even for people who are specially licensed in a way that they can keep lions and cougars as pets. What I discover is that they can be just as much responsibility as dogs, if not more so. It's like, they're probably the type you might have to take out and walk now and then on a leash. You might have to do just as much for them, give them just as much space as that, and there's just differences in what they eat sometimes. One time I once volunteered on a game farm as part of back when I was in high school, as part of a job-based school program, and in that place there was just a little place where they kept these lions on their farm, and we had a lot of questions as to what they fed them and things like that. And I heard that they just fed them little cow sirloin tips. It's probably what you can feed to something like that. Because, probably out in the wild, they probably got all these zebras and giraffes and wildebeest to hunt. But sometimes I'd say when you kind of keep them inside a game farm or something, sometimes you just kind of have to feed them some kind of meat from the supermarket. That might be all you have for them. There's been times as a kid I used to read a lot of books about keeping wild animals as pets. Sometimes there was a lot more responsibility to it than the books would really mention. All too often I used to read about them in old encyclopedias. Like, there was an encyclopedia set from the 60s that I had as a kid. I used to look in there and find all this information. Some of it wasn't all that accurate because it was so old, but they even say in there that you could even let little children keep rabbits as pets. They say in the book that they never bite. But, of course, one of my worst mistakes as a teenager was I went out and bought a rabbit and brought it home, thinking it just wasn't going to be that much responsibility. But once we got it here, I tell you, I found out how much responsibility it was. Somehow or another, people in my family who knew enough about warm-blooded animals certainly knew enough about them to really know how to say it, how to express it, how to tell you about it, and they were just kind of the creatures that have more needs than you'd ever know. And more than that, there were times when it got a little bit mad. It felt like its space was invaded sometimes, and sometimes for the littlest things that would happen. I mean, it never bit me on the skin, but it bit me on the pant leg once. And it bit a few other people. Some people got bitten on the hand by it. Some people got bitten on the leg by it. And that was one thing that the books would have never told you that a rabbit would do. But you'd be surprised and realize they can. Like, people even say that about leopard geckos, for example. People think that leopard geckos are so tame and like they're never going to bite you if you keep them as pets. But I've kept one before, and I don't think I was ever bitten by it, but I knew a lady who did a reptile rescue, because one time I purchased a blue-tongued skink just to rescue it out of the store and built a big cage to keep it in until I could find a new home for it, because that little space they were keeping it at in the store was simply not big enough for it. It needed a bigger space than that to live in. So I built it a big hutch out of wood and chicken wire, and then went out and purchased it, brought it home and put it into place. But when I was looking for a new home for it and found this reptile rescue place, found this lady and donated the blue-tongued skink to her, and she kind of took it in and found a new home for it, a lady who'd spoil it. I thought that was so great because that meant that it was in much better hands than it was in that pet store. Much better hands than I could keep it in. So we were thankful to finally have that business taken care of and finally not have too much to worry about with that. But she was the one who told me that you'd be surprised by what a leopard gecko could do, because she had one get mad at her and she got bit by it. So we come to see that sometimes we could be a little surprised by the things a creature can do and by the things a pet can do. One reason I don't really like to try to keep them as pets, I just feel like they'd be better off in the hands of somebody who knows what to do for them, somebody who's willing to assume the responsibility. There was a lot of stuff I didn't know at the time I purchased some of mine. I had ones that died in my hands because I didn't know what to do for them. That's all the more reason why I kind of prefer the wooden ones over live ones. And probably the reason why I purchased some of the fur pelts that I purchase online, like purchase off of Etsy and stuff. The good thing is that never on Etsy would you find a fur pelt of anything that's been endangered. If it's on the endangered list, they couldn't legally sell it online or anywhere. It's kind of like how they've made all these laws against ivory, for at least. Sometimes they even sell mammoth tusks online, but just so y'all know, the mammoth tusk pieces are never cheap. Sometimes I've even purchased a piece of mammoth tusk online and I still have several pieces of it that I haven't used or worked with yet, but there was like one particular piece of it that I took and used a little rotary tool and engraved a cross into it that I put onto a piece of suede lace. There's been a few places I've gone in that and worn it hanging from my neck. Maybe you've seen that in some of my videos. I'm not wearing it right now, but in some of my videos I am, and you've probably seen it in some of the videos where I have had it on. Kind of goes to show a little place in life where sometimes it does a little good to have a little prehistoric stuff to show. I'm here to tell you all I'm in Kentucky, and in the land that is now Kentucky, some mammoths used to inhabit here. If you ever go to the place, I'm trying to think what it's called, Blue Lick or something like that, where I've gone to do carvings, they've got the little mammoth fossils inside the little education center they have there, because out on the frontier, out on the battlefield there, they found the mammoth underground, archaeologically, I'm speaking. But as for now, I'm here to tell you all that I'm about to be done with the last little mustache on one of these Santas, and it might be time sooner or later to come back and try to carve out their beards. But I do want to say that this has been a good time doing this little video here. Have so much more to share, so much more to say, and hopefully I can have another little episode come in where I can have way so much to tell you all about and show you all so much more as I go about working on it. But I will tell you all that as for this video, that is all I have to say. Goodbye.